Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to GME Compass. Today, we're focusing on a deceptively simple question: how to prevent avoidable errors in the ACGME ADS Annual Update. The goal is to submit a coherent, current, and supportable representation of your program. So in the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to examine the most common failure points, why they may occur, and the practical review processes that you can use before your program director certifies their annual update. This presentation offers operational guidance. Your program should always follow the current instructions that are displayed in the ADS system itself and any specialty-specific direction from the ACGME or your RC. As you listen, consider where your own process is the most vulnerable. Is it data collection, interpretation, reconciliation, or its final approval? The answer is going to help you to decide which control to strengthen first. You do not need a complicated new system. You need a repeatable process that makes accuracy visible and the ownership clear. So as always, before we begin, I would like to briefly review my disclosures. I have no financial relationships that are relevant to this presentation. The information that is shared today is informed by the broad continuum of my professional experience in graduate medical education. That includes accreditation reporting, program operations, committee governance, institutional processes, and continuous improvement. This presentation reflects my personal knowledge and experience and does not represent official guidance from the ACGME or any current or former employer. When completing your program's ADS annual update, always defer to the current instructions that are in the ADS system that are applicable to your specialty-specific guidance and the direction from your designated institutional official or your GME office. My purpose today is to share practical strategies that may help programs to approach this work with increased accuracy, consistency, and higher level of confidence. And then by the end of this presentation, you will be able to identify the most common data, roster, curriculum, and narrative errors that occur during the ADS annual update, distinguish current program information from future plans and outdated historical data, apply a structured process for validating information across record systems and ADS sections, and then use a 3-pass quality review to support accurate, aligned, and defensible certification. These objectives are intentionally practical. The goal is to help you move beyond simply completing the annual update and establish a disciplined process that strengthens the accuracy and credibility of your program's accreditation. This facilitates the ACGME annual data collection. This includes your annual update. The mistake that programs often tend to make is treating it as an isolated form that begins when the reporting window opens, when in reality, the update pulls together information that has been created throughout the academic year: people, sites, rotations, scholarly activity, program changes, and narrative responses. Your submission should be internally consistent and supported by the program's records. Think of the update as a concise representation of the program that the review committee should recognize, not a historical copy of what was true last year. This is extremely important because ADS is one of the several ways that programs communicate with its accrediting body. When the record is treated as a compliance form, teams tend to focus on simply filling boxes. When it's treated as an accreditation record, teams ask a better question: would an external reviewer understand our program correctly from what we submitted? So the root cause of most ADS errors is rarely a lack of effort. It's a process design problem. Data might live across multiple systems, whether it's HR, schedules, evaluation platforms, faculty CVs, PEC files, and local trackers. Different people may interpret the same field differently. Entry begins late, so the team prioritizes completion over reconciliation. Then the program director is asked to certify without enough time for a meaningful review. The remedy is to establish one working source of truth, assign ownership by section, enter information in stages, and reserve a separate period for the final reconciliation. Notice that all 4 causes are operational. That is good news, because operational problems can be redesigned. A strong coordinator creates structure around the work: a tracker, due dates, source links, responsible owners, and review statuses. The tool can be simple. Consistency in using it is what creates the actual safeguard in and of itself. So with those process vulnerabilities in mind, let us examine where they most often appear within the annual update itself. The first common error is assuming that last year's submission is a reliable starting point. It can most certainly be a reference, but it should not become a source of your truth. Personnel changes and credentials tend to expire, leadership roles shift, participating sites evolve, and rotations are redesigned. Begin by confirming the reporting period that is requested in the current update. Then what you want to do is you want to reconcile your ads against your authoritative records. So that would be things like your HR reports, your appointment letters, your current schedules, your affiliation records, your program's roster. Every person and site should have a named validator. If you cannot identify who verified a data element and when, it's not yet ready for certification. One useful practice is to mark every item as verified, changed, or unresolved. Verified means that it was compared with a current source. Changed means the team understands why it differs from the prior submission. Unresolved means that it cannot move to your final review. This prevents copied information from looking complete simply because a field is containing text within the body. And then a second error sometimes can occur when programs mix current operations with future plans. A faculty appointment that begins next month, or a rotation that's going to be redesigned in the second half of the academic year. A site waiting for final approval might be important, but it may not belong in a field that's asking for the current state. You want to read each prompt literally and anchor the response to the requested reporting period. If ADS provides an appropriate narrative field for context, distinguish clearly between what is currently implemented and what is planned. Never make the reader infer whether the change has already occurred. When you're unsure, use the current ADS help resources or contact the ACGME for clarification. The last thing that you want to do is write a narrative or make a change and you end up with an AFI or a citation because of it, because assuming good intent that you simply misread or misunderstood how you read the question. For every plan change, record the anticipated effective date and the approval status that is outside of ADS. That makes it easier to decide whether the item belongs in the present record, a future narrative, or neither of the two. Clear dates also help the program director to avoid certifying something that leadership intends to do but has not yet implemented within the training. Faculty data deserves its own reconciliation because small inconsistencies can create a misleading picture of program resources. Confirm whether each faculty member is active during the reporting period, whether their role accurately reflects their responsibilities, and whether credentials or appointments are current. Review reported effort for reasonableness and consistency with the program's actual educational structure. Recent annual update cycles have included changes to the collection of faculty scholarship information. The broader lesson is that programs should never rely on a prior year checklist. Review the current prompts, annual update overview, FAQs, and specialty-specific instructions before beginning your data collection. The lesson is broader. Do not rely on an old checklist. Use the current year's prompts and resources. You always want to be checking, cross-checking, and cross-checking again. Create a faculty exception list as opposed to rechecking every record with equal intensity. So you want to flag new faculty, departures, role changes, expiring certifications, unusual effort, and records that changed since last year. Focused exception review is efficient, but it should supplement and not replace a complete roster reconciliation. Accurate individual records are essential, but they must also reconcile with the program's broader operational picture. Another important thing to note is if you have a lot of changes within your faculty, and they can be changes with good intent. It could be something as simple as one faculty member was promoted to a different position. within your program or your department, or maybe someone retired. And then it creates a domino or a trickle effect where then this person got promoted to here, this person got promoted to here, this person got promoted to here. While you know and you understand that there's really only one true change, and then there was a domino of changes as a result that were a good thing, the ACGME is not going to necessarily know that when they review your program. So it's extremely important if you have several or multiple changes within your faculty roster, whether it's a lot of people leaving, retiring, onboarding, or simply changing titles, that you explain that in your major changes section. And it doesn't have to be anything complicated or over the top or lengthy, but you just want to explain to them the why. Because remember, this is the story of your program. So you want to explain so that they know that there's not something going on that they might have to keep one eye on, and it's actually something that's totally normal. Roster errors are especially visible because the same people appear in multiple systems. So a resident or a fellow might be listed with the wrong status, an incorrect completion date, or training level that does not match the current academic year. You want to reconcile 3 views: the roster and ads, the sponsoring institution or HR record, as well as actual program operations reflected in your schedules and your evaluations. Investigate every discrepancy as opposed to choosing the version that's the most easy to enter. Transfers, leaves, off-cycle completions, extensions, and changes in complement may require additional attention and institutional coordination. Do not forget that a roster discrepancy may represent more than a typing error. It may reveal an incomplete status change, an appointment problem, or an off-cycle training issue requiring institutional awareness. So when you see any type of discrepancy that's happening in your rosters, you want to take a pause when something doesn't quite match up correctly. And the purpose of this review is not merely to make the fields match, it's to understand the reason and then make sure that they are all correct and accurate in all of the places. Your block diagram should represent the curriculum that your residents or your fellows actually experience. Common errors include outdated rotation names, incorrect duration, missing sites, or inconsistencies between the diagram and the narrative description of the program. Compare the block diagram with your master schedule, rotation goals and objectives, and participating site information. If the program changed its curriculum during the year, verify which version the prompt requires. Follow specialty-specific instructions because expectations can vary. A useful final test is whether an external reviewer could understand where, when, and how training occurs without needing your team to explain your diagram. If the block diagram is maintained as a separate document, add version control. Include the academic year, approval date, and owner in the file name or the document properties. Then you're going to archive version. This reduces the risk of next year's team edits in obsolete diagram where it cannot identify what the RC previously actually received. A rule of thumb that I always learned, my history years and years and years ago, was I worked in a few law offices actually, and I just got trained to save documents by the date and then the title, and the date always goes year, month, and then day of the month. And the reason for that is because it always goes in chronological order that way. And then it will default to alphabetical from there. And it's just a habit that got drilled into me when I was very young and early in my career. And I've gotten used to it. And it drives people batty because you can have so many versions. But that being said, you always see and know, and it's crystal clear what the most up-to-date version is. But you can also kind of see the evolution to get to that version. And then one other important piece of information when it comes to the block diagram as we're having this conversation is a mistake that I made at some point in my career. It was one of the first years that truly owning the ads update was my responsibility along with the program director. And it was a year similar to what we're talking about that you want to avoid in the sense that the deadline got very quickly. It snuck up on us. Time got away from us. We needed to really focus on some big things. And by focusing on the big things, what that meant was we didn't pay close attention to the little things. And one of those little things was the block diagram. And I was new at owning this process at the time. My program director at the time was new to her role. And we just interpreted it as a block diagram is your block diagram. So we took our block diagram in the sense of your schedule, your multicolored block diagram schedule that you use every day across the academic year. And we uploaded it and we were like, perfect, they have our block diagram. If you're new to GME, if you are a new program coordinator or program manager, it's important that you understand that while we use the term block diagram within ACGME web ads, it is not your schedule block diagram. It's something that's actually different. It is ACGME's way of seeing how across the year you get certain experiences, what rotations you have, what affiliating site it might happen, how many weeks of the year you might get or how many weeks of the block, that you might get things like continuity of care, or in GME, did you get maybe family planning exposure, depending on what your specialty is. But the block diagram that ACGME is going to ask for is not your monthly regular block schedule that you use every day. And then narrative fields should not read like a marketing copy. This is really, really important. They should not be so vague that the RC cannot understand what happened. Use a 4-part discipline. State the claim, identify supporting evidence, clarify implementations, status, and then describe the outcome when it's known. So for example, rather than writing what the program enhanced wellness, identify the specific intervention, the reason that it was selected, when it began, what evidence is being monitored. You want to avoid overstating success when the program has only implemented a first step in the process. Precision builds credibility. It also helps to ensure that ads aligns with PEC action plans, survey follow-up, as well as your other documentation. So before drafting, gather your underlying evidence and agree on the message with the program director. Writing first and searching for support later often produces an overstatement. If an outcome is not yet known, say what the program's monitoring and when it's going to reevaluate it. That's more credible than declaring an intervention successful prematurely. Ads fields do not exist independently. A faculty roster, curriculum, diagram, participating site list, improvement narrative, and descriptions of your program changes collectively form one record. A response may be technically accurate by itself, but creating a contradiction somewhere else. So for example, a narrative may describe a new rotation at a site that is absent from participating site information. A claim about added faculty resources may not align with the faculty roster. Build a crosswalk of related fields and conduct a horizontal review across sections after section level review is complete. Your goal is not only field accuracy, it's field level coherence. So a simple crosswalk can list each material change and every ad section that it may or may not affect. A new participating site, for example, could influence site information, your block diagram, rotations, faculty narrative responses, and so many more things. Reviewing the change across all connected fields prevents the partial updates that create contradictions in your story. Cross-field consistency is only possible when the program is equally precise about what a field does and does not mean. Blank, not applicable, 0, and unknown are not synonymous. A blank may indicate that required work is incomplete. Not applicable should mean that the field genuinely does not apply to your program, and the reason should be defensible. 0 is a numeric value and should not be used simply to clear a validation message. Unknown means that the program has more verification to do. It is not a final answer. Review all blanks and unusual values as an exception report. If the system instructions are unclear, consult the current annual update resources or contact ad support as opposed to just simply guessing. Use simple validation as a minimum control, not as proof that the submission is correct. A system may accept a value that is logically inconsistent with another response or factually wrong. Human review is still essential. The best reviewer is someone who understands the program but did not perform the original entry. The ACGME posts each program's exact timeframe and adds under important dates, and it sends the initial notification at the start of the reporting window. You're going to want to use that deadline and work backwards. So 6 weeks before submission, inventory to the sections and identify any changes. 4 weeks out, assign your owners and collect source records. 2 weeks out, you want to enter your data and reconcile related fields. 1 week out, give the program director a review-ready draft, and then 2 days before the deadline, run final validation and preserve time for unexpected questions or system issues. The deadline should not mark the end of your review cycle, not the beginning of your data entry. Build internal data around the program director's availability, not only the ACGME deadline. So if the program director is traveling or on service during the final week, you're going to want to move the review earlier, right? Also, avoid scheduling certification immediately after your data entry. A short pause helps the team to return with fresh attention and catch familiar mistakes. A strong timeline creates capacity, but accountability determines whether each section is actually ready for review. Another thing that you're going to want to take into consideration is, as we've talked in so many videos, every hospital institution GME functions a little bit differently. So some GME offices are going to review your ads update and should review your ads update before it gets officially submitted and signed off by your DIO and sent to ACGME. So they actually might have a timeline that is a week or 2 weeks or 10 days, whatever, depending on each specific person or office, that's actually before the deadline. So your deadline for completion may not be equal to ACGME's deadline for submission. You want to keep that in mind as well. And then a practical way to prevent omissions is to define 3 roles for every section. Who prepares the information, who validates it against the authoritative source, and who approves it. The coordinator often organizes and enters the data, but should not be expected to independently authenticate every single credential, appointment, curriculum decision, or improvement claim. The program director retains responsibility for final review and certification. A second reviewer adds value because the person who entered the data is less likely to notice familiar errors. If you adapt this matrix to your institution, but you make ownership explicit before collection begins. The validating role may vary by institution. Human resources may validate appointment data. Your DIO office may validate complementary institutional information. Your rotation director may validate curriculum details. The principle is to send each question to the person closest to the authoritative source, as opposed to asking one coordinator to infer every single answer. And then use your 3 distinct review passes. So the first pass checks completeness. Every required field is addressed. Attachments are present. No unresolved placeholders remain. The second pass checks accuracy. Every key value is compared with its source record, and unusual values are then investigated. The third pass checks your coherence. Related fields are compared with one another, narratives align with rosters and curriculum, and the submission accurately reflects the program's current story. Separating these passes is far more reliable than asking one person to proofread everything at one time. Each pass requires a different way of seeing the record. Document the result of each pass within your tracking system. Use simple statuses such as complete, discrepancy found, corrected, and approved. This creates a visible audit trail, and it prevents a corrected field from being accidentally overwritten with an older value. It also makes next year's preparation faster because the team can see where the problem occurred. Once those 3 review passes are complete, certification becomes an informed decision as opposed to an administrative formality. And then before your program director certifies, conduct a short submission readiness review. Confirm that validation messages are all resolved, changes from the prior year are understood, and high-risk sections such as your rosters, leadership, sites, and curriculum received independent reviews. Confirm that narratives are supportable and that the program director has reviewed the full record as opposed to selecting excerpts. Finally, retain the submission confirmation and your internal working materials according to your institutional policy. Certification should represent an informed decision that the record is complete and accurate, not simply the final click that required you to meet the deadline. Consider holding a 15-minute certification huddle with your coordinator, program director, and maybe even a second reviewer. Review the high-risk changes, unresolved questions, and confirmation that the final version, not an earlier draft, has been examined. A short, structured conversation can prevent the rushed email approval that leaves assumptions unspoken. Ultimately, the central message is very simple. The strong annual update is built throughout the year. Maintain accurate source data as changes occur. Reconcile information across systems before the reporting window becomes urgent. You want to validate each section through accountable ownership and independent review. Then certify a coherent record that reflects the program's actual operations, challenges, improvements, and resources. This approach reduces last-minute stress, but more importantly, it strengthens the integrity of the program's accreditation story. So thank you for joining GME Compass. Before your next update, choose one improvement from today's framework and build it into your annual operating process. After your submission, conduct a brief retrospective. Record what required the most follow-up, which sources were really difficult or challenging to obtain, what should be maintained prospectively. Turn each lesson into a calendar item or a routine process. That is how the annual update becomes less and less and less burdensome each year, while the program's accreditation infrastructure becomes stronger and stronger and stronger. So thank you for joining me in this GME Compass presentation. If you found this discussion valuable, I invite you to subscribe to the GME Compass YouTube channel and engage with our content through your likes, comments, and your shares. Your engagement, especially your subscription, helps us to continue to provide free, accessible professional development resources for GME professionals. New videos are available every Monday through Mastering GME Mondays, every Wednesday through Systems for Success Wednesdays, and every Friday through our Let's Talk series. Your support allows us to continue building a space where GME professionals can learn, connect, and grow together. And before we close, I invite you to continue the conversation by following GME Compass across our social media platforms. There you will find new resources, practical accreditation and operations guidance, upcoming professional development opportunities, community conversations, and the latest GME Compass announcements. So thank you for all of the work that you do each day to support our trainees, faculty members, programs, institutions, and the broader GME community. We are honored to walk alongside of you as we continue turning GME complexity into clarity and control. So until next time, take care and keep moving GME forward. Thank you all.